Shalom Chaverim, or hello, my friends. This is another interview for the Great Rabbino. We're on Zoom, and I'm live with Hadar Horwitz, or in English, Horwitz, who is an Israeli wrestler, but currently in the United States of America. Hadar, how are you?
I'm great. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm good. I'm in my wrestling hat. I'm in my wrestling T-shirt.
You got full gear on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's just start where you're from in Israel.
I'm from Tel Aviv, the greatest city in Israel, in my opinion.
Yeah, in a lot of people's opinion, there's probably no better place to visit.
No.
And when did you begin wrestling?
Oh my God, I started out really early. I started at Gary's actually. Like, I think at the time I was like the youngest that's been ever accepted to train in that age, like 12, something like that. I don't know, just a long time ago. And
you're in the States because you just told me you're going to be going to a new school in Orlando. Who are you going to be learning with?
We're going to be at the Flatbacks Wrestling School, which is ran by Tyler Breeze and Shawn Spears, which I'm so really excited to go there. I just, words cannot describe.
Yeah, they're two awesome wrestlers, two different companies, two different styles, so you're going to get a lot of stuff. And part of the excitement of being in a wrestling school right now, especially in Florida, is that like those guys aren't traveling.
Yeah,
so they probably gonna, you're going to get
that's
more.
One hell of a perk. At least one thing out of COVID,
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about the Israeli wrestling scene. This actually has come up a bunch of times on my blog with different people. So what is it like to you? Obviously you're in the States. There's no wrestling to my knowledge going on in Israel during COVID.
No.
And there's barely anything going on in Israel during COVID in general, but certainly not wrestling. So
Israel.
What's the wrestling scene when it's not like in COVID, and how can it grow?
How can it grow? Well, that's one tough of a question, but usually pre-COVID, there would usually be like a show like once every a couple months. It depends. Usually like for the last year or so, it was mainly Gary's shows. He used to throw a big show every like 4 or 5 months. And he actually threw a really big one at the Cinema City, which is like the big theater in Tel Aviv. And he brought Matt Seidel and Billy Gunn and Sammy Guevara, Darby Allin was a real big one. And then, cut short COVID and all this stuff. But I hope it all gets back to soon and gets back to normal. I don't know how could it grow, to be honest. I'm not the guy for that answer. I just pray that the right people would make the right calls and make it, grow. But I believe that there is, an audience for pro wrestling in Israel. I definitely believe they are, but you need to know how to reach them. And people in Israel, it's a country smaller than New Jersey or something. I don't know. And like in the States, if you need to drive 2 hours for something, it's not that big of a deal. But in Israel, if a pro wrestling fan needs to drive 2 hours, I just watch WWE or something. Like, I don't need to do that. So it's just, it's a matter of reaching the people.
Yeah, I imagine as someone who's involved in sports and has gotten to experience a bunch of different sports in Israel, there's nothing, you can't compare almost anything in the States to a Maccabi Tel Aviv game. You just can't. It's just
no.
It's so, and Hapoel Yerushalayim also. It's so exciting, and unless it's like the last 2 minutes of a close NBA game or playoff game, or a regular season game, you go to watch. You don't go to. So I imagine that could be true of Israel too. That the excitement could just grow.
Absolutely. I think I've only discovered like for the last year or so, especially at Gary's show, how much of these fans are like actual, modern wrestling fans and not just the casual wrestling fans. We used to watch Van Erichs that they went like, with their grandparents or something. Yeah. That's because usually when you tell someone pro wrestling in Israel, they're like, oh yeah, Hogan, Van Erich, that's it. But, at these shows with Guevara and Darby, people would come and they would have their AEW shirts. I was like personally kind of in shock, but that they exist in there and they are excited just as much. And you said it right. It's like the the Maccabi Tel Aviv games, it's like a combination of like, the European fans, that they have the excitement that, I mean, I don't want to talk down on U.S. fans or anything, but you know what I'm saying, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, of course.
It's just a different environment and excitement.
Absolutely. It's hard to explain. You have to go and feel it. And like,
definitely.
So give me like, who's the best wrestler you've ever wrestled? And let's start there.
I'd say Ken Kerbis. I'm a sucker for Kerbis. I'll have to go with him. So
he's a big wrestler in Israel, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ken's one of the bigger guys. I don't know him, but hopefully we'll cross paths soon. And then, so who are some of the guys that you look up to when you're like forming your style of wrestling? Are you a high flyer? Are you a mat guy? Are you a
I'd like to think myself as a striker kind of guy, but what I like in pro wrestling these days are kind of guys that move, that every little movement of them has their own characteristic of it, like guys like Cameron Grimes, for example, like guys that every single step that they take in the ring have their own kind of personality and character into it. That's what I'm into these days mostly.
So I've gotten to see him as Trevor Lee live once or twice at smaller shows before he was in WWE. And he never got me excited at all. I didn't really get the appeal. I didn't see the appeal so much in Impact when he was there. And I love the Cameron Grimes character. I think he is such a good heel, and he is good. You want to hate him.
Yeah. I think he's one of the guys that adopted the WWE style so quickly and so good. Like, I don't remember anyone doing it so good like he did it.
So what are your goals? Are you do you want to do indie wrestling, or is your main goal to be on a promotion? Where do you see this going?
Well, as a kid from Israel, because the thing is, I like to think about it, is the difference between aspiring young pro wrestlers from Israel is that, like, we have a second kind of a glass ceiling that we need to break, because we just can't say like, you know what, I'm just going to be a pro wrestler, hop in my car and just like, that's what I'm doing right now. We have to we always have to like save up a little, fly, come back, it's always the kind of rotating thing. But I have always, like, ever since I remember everything, ever since at least I can say I kind of understood the business, that I only want to make a living out of pro wrestling. I really could care less, like, what am I doing with it? Obviously, I would love to get signed by any company and, have the recognition and stuff. But as long as I'm wrestling and I can make a living off of it, that's just my dream right there.
Right, Hadar. Well, we'll watch out for you, and you get to mix it up with two of the best out there at the school, and that will be you'll have to change your answer pretty quickly. That the best person you ever wrestled is Tyler Breeze. Yeah, he's I actually have followed him. I was very into like FCW and some of those things, and just reading about it and always who the guys were. Now NXT kind of spoils that, because you see them.
Because it's gotten
and you're like waiting. And so, when he was like Mike, I think his first name was like Mike Dalton, and we changed his gimmick and was really on these takeover shows. And then he went up so the Breezango gimmick was sort of over, but it didn't have a ceiling. And now that they're back in NXT, they can be that top veteran tag team.
Yeah, they're so good. They're ridiculously good. The last match they had that they took the titles, oh my God. I think I jumped out of the couch.
Absolutely. So, Achi, toda rabah, Chag Sameach, Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you so much.
And well, hopefully I'll get to see you at a show in the near future.
Thank you so much, man.